Welcome to Insights for Manufacturing, the podcast that supports the UK manufacturing sector. Hosted by Jeff Beecham, the manufacturer's recruiter. Hello and welcome to Insights for Manufacturing. Today we're discussing one of the key functions within any successful manufacturing organisation, and that's purchasing. I'm delighted to welcome my special guest today, Katie Durie, the buyer's coach. Welcome, Katie, and how are you today?
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for asking me to join you. I'm really well, thank you. Are you?
Good. Yes, all good. Thank you very much. Good to see you on here. And purchasing, it's a quite a wide-ranging subject matter. And wow, given the the carnage of the current global supply chain, that with the the backdrop of Brexit, COVID, the energy crisis, wars going on, and all the rest of the uncertain economic times, there couldn't be a better time for UK manufacturers to review and improve their their purchasing performance. Could there?
No, definitely. I think it's one of the times in history where maybe in the future people might look back and say, gosh, they've had a lot to deal with at that particular time in history, definitely. And certainly procurement have faced so many challenges, the ones that you sort of mentioned, and there may be more to come. We don't know. Curveballs come from all directions. And you're right, UK manufacturers definitely need to, review how they're procuring things, how their departments are performing and how can they improve. So, for definite, procurement departments need to be very agile initially. So obviously, we want to be strategic. Sometimes you have to react when things just come at you out of nowhere. And there needs to be that kind of agility, and you need to be able to kind of pick up almost sort of a pre-prepared risk plan, if you like, that hopefully has already been done. If it hasn't been done, that's something that that needs to be looked at, definitely. And you can't predict every scenario, but you can try to protect the businesses and your business and your supply chain by looking at what impact a scenario might have and try to do something about it in advance, or at least have a network that you can tap into, and the right supply chain that can be agile as well.
And I suppose from an audience perspective, anybody listening to this podcast who's currently working in procurement will be acutely aware of the the current challenges, but for anybody that's maybe stepping into purchasing or procurement for the first time, or looking to to get into purchasing as a career route, would you be able to help those people understand just how intrinsic purchasing is to the success of a business, Katie?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's maybe in the past it might have been viewed as a purchasing function that just simply does the transactional side of looking after a business, making sure that they order the things that the business are demanding and that they say that they need. But actually, there's a lot more to it than that. And I think over the last, few years really has kind of proven that there's a strategic element to purchasing. It is very intrinsic to any business. And I think quite often when there's a problem with any kind of supply chain issue, anyone in a regular company would typically go looking for the buyer, who's the buyer, and speak with them and try and help the buyer, or try and get the buyer to help them solve their problems. So it really affects all the different functions. Certainly operations, obviously marketing people need to know that parts are coming in, so that when they go off and do their side of the business, try to sell to customers and fulfill orders, the function of purchasing is just so important, because if parts aren't coming through, obviously they can't create the product, and that would disappoint customers, and that would have a massive impact to the business. So it's extremely intrinsic. And a purchasing department can also be a good place for the rest of the business to go to for advice as well, and trained professionals in procurement can help the other departments sort of be more savvy commercially, if you know what I mean. For example, I've been on a call in the past with sort of an engineering colleague that and I hadn't pre-prepared for the call with that colleague and sat there in front of a supplier. It was something that happened at the drop of a hat. And, you know, I realized very quickly I should have had a pre-meeting with that engineering colleague, because he was kind of giving away all the leverage, you know, saying to this supplier, we've only got, you know, you're the only option, the other one turned us down and there's nowhere else to go. And I'm sat there sort of cringing, you know. Obviously that's a lesson learned, and you know, sort of for the future, it's important, I think, for purchasing people to pass on that kind of savviness and help to educate other departments, so that no one's, you know, sort of giving away negotiation leverage and things like that, and having conversations with suppliers, and leaving your company sort of open, really, and quite exposed commercially. So there's lots of different reasons why purchasing and procurement departments are intrinsic to any business.
Good. And as you say, you know, that collaboration, you know, with engineering and other departments is a good, I suppose it mitigates the risk of you coming off worse in a financial negotiation or contract negotiation. So thank you very much for sharing that.
Right.
So compared to when you started out in purchasing, so you're what, 22 years or so into the world of purchasing.
I know, I don't look that old.
You started off at Rolls-Royce, and you did a fair stint at JCB as well. So you've worked for some stellar you know, blue chip manufacturing businesses. How has purchasing as a function changed in that time?
Yeah, I think it's changed dramatically. As you say, it's 22 years ago since I started. I was a graduate trainee starting at Rolls-Royce in Derby, and I was there for 5 years, and I went to JCB for 10 years, and sort of onwards and upwards in a couple of other companies too. And over time, I think obviously one of the most, you know, obvious changes has been the technology, and that you could say that applies to any different department, any different type of company. The tech and the time and the speed that you can actually source parts. So in the past, and I literally remember doing this when I first started at the aero engine company 22 years ago, we used to print out engineering drawings, ginormous, great big drawings, and laboriously print out letters, you know, requests for quotations, and go and sort them out with the post office department, and you had to wait. It was like snail mail. Just, you had to wait so much. Now, obviously, everything's done. You just send files by email and things like that. So the speed of everything's much quicker. We're now also able to do due diligence and checking out suppliers a lot quicker and easier, because everything's there. Tips to check and, you know, do credit checks and things like that is huge, and it just saves a lot of time. So time saving is obviously one of the critical things. In terms of strategy, procurement strategy, when I first started 22 years ago, it seemed like the whole world was talking about global strategy and global sourcing. And it was all about, you know, let's to go out there and low cost sources, you know, let's sort of act as a global, you know, corporation. And now I've noticed with a lot of companies, they're realizing, especially with a lot of the issues that you mentioned, you know, with the pandemic and what have you, that now a lot of companies are trying to bring things in and source much closer in order to mitigate, against, you know, the long lead times and things like that, for example, that are basically stopping them from getting what they need when they need it. So that's another example of a massive change.
Where do you see the main challenges, particularly for buyers in SME manufacturers, Katie? Because you know, a lot of the large corporates, you know, will have sometimes huge buying teams, you know, lots of structure there. But when it comes to, and I'm not saying they won't have challenges, because they will, but for SMEs where there is a lot less resource and maybe sometimes budgets are also tighter, where do you see the main challenges there within the SME community for buyers?
Yeah, you're right. I think there is a big difference actually for SME buyers, manufacturing companies versus sort of the big corporates. And you know, I've been privileged to work in both scenarios actually. So after sort of JCB, I did work as a purchasing manager in an aerospace supplier. So I was sort of the manager in purchasing for an SME, and the contrast was dramatic. It was a case of all of a sudden you go from having kind of lots of power, generally speaking, quite a lot of power with the suppliers, to sometimes, you know, thinking, oh, how am I going to get these suppliers that are actually a lot bigger than our company to listen to sort of little old us. So the kind of like the power divide is very different, and that is a challenge. And I think the way to overcome that is to try to build relationships and still try to get in there and go and visit them and try to get time with them. With the key strategic suppliers, not all of them, and it's a case of communicating and relationship building, I think, to try to sort of get them to take notice of you and listen to the things that you need as a buyer. Also, I think as well, the ERP systems might be not as comprehensive as sort of the great big high speed, high tech ERP systems that a corporate might use. And that can make it a bit harder work sometimes if they're using something much more laborious, let's say, and that just can slow you down a little bit. I think as well, the SMEs, especially in manufacturing, quite often have a lot of pressure. So when they do get opportunities to quote, the purchasing team then need to react very quickly to make sure that they get all the quotes they need from their suppliers, because there's quite often a lot of pressure on SMEs, as you'll know, to win work. It's quite hard, isn't it, to stay afloat, especially in this day and age, and there's a lot of cost pressure and all sorts. So yeah, the purchasing department have to react very, very quickly, and I've been experienced in trying to make sure things turn around quickly. And again, it does come down to relationships. When you need that quote to come back, if you've not got the relationships there, then you're going to struggle to help the marketing department pull a quote together. And it could be that little piece of work that they're trying to win might actually just keep the company going, for the next few years. It could be quite a big contract. So there's a lot of challenges for smaller companies, definitely.
Yeah, thanks for that. And it seems to me that the smaller the organisation, and if I take as an example an SME business that maybe has one person within the business responsible for purchasing, and that's quite common in a very small engineering or manufacturing company. I guess some of the the softer skills, if I can put it like that, some of the softer skills come into play and are as important as your negotiation skills or your commercial or financial acumen. It's that the personality of a buyer sometimes can make or break a commercial gain for the business. As you say, it's that ability to strike up relationships but maintain them, quite often when your supplier might be under a lot of pressure as well as yourself, and you're getting it as the buyer from manufacturing, logistics, engineering, everything flying at you from all angles, and that ability to cope in that scenario. So I guess time management, would you put that up there as a pretty big priority to master?
I definitely would put time management up there as well. Yeah, an ability to prioritize, because typically the daily life of a buyer is to turn up at work and there's some problem that someone wants to talk about. And obviously you've got to help. You can't sort of ignore the problem. It might have a big impact on the business, so you can't ignore it. Sometimes you need to know, they need to be able to push back and think, right, it is a problem, but it's something that I can deal with after I've done something else that I know I need to do today, maybe sort of, achieving their objectives or something like that. And they need to be able to sort of decide if the problem's a showstopper or not. It could just be that it's that person's problem, but quite often an email inbox can just be a long list of everyone else's problems, can't it? And, you've got to be able to sort of be resilient and strong enough and sort of communicate in a way that doesn't upset other people. You're right, the soft skills are important. You've got to kind of have a way about you so that you can kind of be, push back sometimes. Sometimes the problem does need to be dealt with, as I say, but you need to be able to push back sometimes and manage their expectations as well. So, say, look, I've just got to finish this off, but can I come back to you this afternoon? And we'll sort something out about 2:00. And then they go off happy knowing that some resolution is going to come along. And yeah, definitely time management. Also, I think the person needs to be the kind of a person that can motivate themselves, someone that can get up and, sort of spring out of bed in the morning and get to work and be quite excited to go and do their job as a buyer. Because even though it is hard and it is stressful and you do get everyone queuing around your desk, that person needs to be able to be motivated and happy and smiling and deal with it. there's so much variety in purchasing that every day is different. There's never an opportunity to be bored. If you're bored in a purchasing job, I think you're just maybe in the wrong purchasing job. Get another one, because there's so much variety that you can enjoy, and the person needs to be motivated. I've actually hired people that have got less experience in all the kind of, negotiation skills and those kind of skills, because I could see from the CV and the way they come across that they're motivated and they're hungry and they want to go and learn, because things can be learned, but I don't think it's easy to make someone motivated. If someone's not typically motivated, it's really hard to change them. Not saying it's impossible, but you can teach someone negotiate, you can teach someone how to deal with suppliers. And if you've got the right background and the sort of character, as you say, able to manage time, things like that, you can learn the rest of it.
Hire for attitude, you can teach
attitude. Exactly. It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are the priorities for UK manufacturing right now? What do UK manufacturing businesses need to do right now to mitigate risk, and optimize their procurement strategy, and ultimately ensure that they've got a sustainable business?
Yeah, thanks. I think there's two main, there's obviously a lot that they can do, but I think two main things is reduce cost dramatically, quickly, as much as possible, and also make sure that they get the parts that they need to mitigate against not being able to create and build and and supply everything that the customer needs. They're the main two things. So how would we do that? Well, I mentioned a risk register before. If a company doesn't already have a risk register, which means they've had everyone in the company almost, some of the key departments in the room, going through what each risk is, and it needs to be specific to their company. So what are the list of risks? What are the impact? What do we think the impact is going to be? Is it high, medium, low? And what's sort of the outcome, and that kind of thing. And just going through sort of the process of creating a risk register and making sure that there are actions and timelines for how we're going to mitigate these risks. So that's kind of like a general something that all companies need to do, so that everyone's thinking about what could happen and everyone's therefore a little bit more on the toes. If something does happen, it's like, oh, we talked about this in the risk, and then regularly review it, and keep it up to date. I think I see a lot of companies at the moment struggling to get parts in because of all the different supply chain issues that they've had. So, it needs to be try to find alternative sources if possible, look for other opportunities, and sometimes dual sourcing is necessary. I know, obviously, in manufacturing, if you're creating a complicated product that takes a lot of expensive tooling, you can't just, throw another £500,000 at a brand new tool in a factory down the road. But there might be other things that you can do. And I think having a really good, strong network is important as well. And keeping in touch with what's going on in the market and keeping in touch with suppliers and listening to what they're telling us. You never know, because if you're able to sort of pick up the phone or have a call with someone that might just be able to answer the problem, if you've got a good network, you're more able to respond and get sort of the ideas and the things that you need. But yeah, I think cost and risk register are important.
I guess, cost reduction, that we could probably do a whole podcast just on cost reduction. Just off the top of your head, so if I was a buyer working in an SME, finding my feet a little bit, and you could give three sort of pieces of advice or three priority areas or processes or things to look at in terms of cost reduction, would there be three pieces of low-hanging fruit, if you like, or three? What would the first three steps be? I guess is the question I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think what I've done in the past is I've sort of taken a spend report and looked to the highest spend. So if I know, this with this supplier is the highest spend, sort of look at that in kind of like, priority order. So look at the spend and where is the money going and that kind of thing. I'd also look at contracts as well and just open them up. Sometimes we create contracts and then they get put in a drawer or they're sort of filed on the PC and then no one ever looks at them. We've got cost reduction agreed, for example. Are we actually switching the system and changing the prices when we said we would, according to the contract, and that kind of thing? Just really sort of using what we've already got. Low-hanging fruit, sometimes it's worth getting in to one room, people that are on the shop floor, because quite often people in factories and manufacturing companies, they don't always get asked their opinion, and it can be quite glaringly obvious to quite a lot of people that are there working on the shop floor in the company. But if they don't get asked, then they'll never really voice their opinion, because they might feel intimidated or what have you. But if they do have an opportunity, even if there's a box that people can sort of put an idea on a piece of paper, and just everyone's got to submit 1 or 2 ideas, get people sort of actively thinking, and maybe even have sort of reward for some ideas that end up sort of getting picked up and used, and give them a prize or something like that. Kind of try and get people's imaginations going, because they're the people ultimately that are there. They'll know where the costs are. It might be as well a good idea to have a good walk around the shop floor with some of the team members and look and say, are we using too much packaging? And understanding the process, show me how this part's created from start to finish, and follow the line. Is there any waste? How can we take cost out, and think of it in like lean manufacturing terms as well? Is there any waste? Are we using too much? Is there great big piles of boxes that we never use? Are we returning pallets and stillages and things like that? There's just like so much opportunity if people just made a point of walking around the factory every morning. Just take half an hour, go in earlier, try and do it with a few people, and get them to write down their ideas, and get everyone working on, right, we noticed this, we're going to change this, and make a point of having a meeting every week, right? You said you were going to do this on this day. Have you done it? Yes or no? What we're going to do to pull it back, and also, actually, if you're going to go through that kind of a process, put a stake in the ground at the very beginning. So, today we spend X amount of packaging. You've done an exercise. Let's check in 6 months' time. Have we saved money from getting rid of all this waste and the wasteful processes and things like that? That was probably more than 3. Sorry.
That's brilliant.
Forever on this kind of stuff.
The point you make about going on that sort of walk around the plant. I mean, most modern manufacturing businesses and engineering businesses, would have whether it's a full-on Gemba walk,
Yes.
or it's the plant manager, or the machine shop manager, production manager, whatever it might be. The directors will get involved in a plant. They do walk the floor, but I think there are sometimes gaps where maybe the buyer, particularly if it's not a large company, somebody from procurement may well usually go on a Gemba walk as part of that team. But with a small SME, maybe not. You might get the general manager or the production manager have a walk around the plant. But would the buyer accompany them? Maybe not. So that's a really good point where purchasing, you can't see everything from an office or a spreadsheet, can you? So it's really good to get out there and have a look.
It's also worth doing that with the supplier as well, going to the supplier's factory and looking at their process and seeing if there's any opportunities to take out waste that you could then share, the benefit of with the supplier, and that can come straight off your spend.
That's a really good point. That's probably part of the supplier development relationship. Why should you just accept that the quality and the price that they're giving you is optimized? If they've got a lot of waste at their end, that's being passed on to you, isn't it?
And they might not realize it. They might not even realize it because they're there every day. Sometimes a fresh pair of eyes can just, make changes, can't it?
So I know you've just launched a new membership community for buyers. It's a wildly exciting time for you, no doubt. What is Buyers World?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So Buyers World is a membership opportunity, really, but it's not just a membership that you sort of pay into and then don't get involved. Inside Buyers World, when members join, they have access to lots of little mini videos where I'll be talking about all different aspects of procurement, taking cost out, negotiation, or managing risks, all sorts of things like that. There are workbooks, so they can follow the videos, do the work in the workbooks, and it's very practical based. I'm not trying to teach theory because I think they can get that elsewhere. what I'm trying to do is use my practical experience and tell them and help them. And it's you could literally join Buyers World and then start as a buyer and follow the advice, you know, having not done it before. It suits any buyer. And, you know, I would say in particular ones maybe that starting at the very beginning as well, although, you know, suits all different types of levels. We do talk about time management quite a lot at the beginning, because I do think once you get that kind of straight and prioritization, then you sort of can set yourself up day to day for doing all the other things that you need to do. Then we have live Q&A sessions once a week. So if they have questions, they can submit them to me a couple of days before, and then I'll sort of deliver the live Q&A, answer the questions. And if anyone needs extra support, we can organise that as well. And I'm trying to build up a community so that there are lots of buyers in the network that can bounce off ideas and get feedback from each other. So it's very interactive. There's nothing like it that I've ever found, because I wish I had access to something similar when I was starting out, definitely. And so that's why I created it. It's very different. It might take a while for the market to get used to this kind of different sort of concept. It is all online, so you don't need to be in a particular place. I'm just you know, just launched, so literally it's hot off the press.
Great. I'm sure it'll be a really valuable resource for buyers all over the country and indeed internationally. So where can people find Buyers World? Have you've got a designated
my website?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. It's buyersworld.co.uk. So .co.uk. And if they want to email me, there's email address information inside there. There's a corporate package button which goes through. They can send me an email. And you know, I've got sort of various corporate packages, discounts for bulk, you know, bulk numbers of buyers and things like that, and extra training.
Okay, great. So, Katie, I know you're a huge advocate for UK manufacturing. We've all seen over the last couple of years, you know, a gradual but increasing move towards reshoring. You touched on this a little bit earlier on in the conversation. You know, reshoring from low-cost countries. What's your take on the argument to UK manufacturing becoming even more self-sufficient? You know, buying locally, and dare I say it, becoming more protectionist?
Yeah, I think it just has to happen. I think we do need to look around. You know, what do we have on our doorstep? I must admit, in my roles in the past, I have been responsible for doing low-cost sourcing and moving work out to, you know, India, China. That's often been, you know, the strategy of the company for various, you know, reasons, and there are lots of benefits to that, and quite capable companies in those places too. Because now the long lead times can have dramatic impacts on the ability of any company to produce the things they need to produce. It is very important to shorten that if possible. And it could be having a warehouse, even if you're low-cost country sourcing, but having a warehouse and having that paid for by the supplier, that's possible too. Just to have something on the doorstep that you can pull from, you know, your demand can come from. But if we can get back into UK manufacturing, you know, there is so much good news that doesn't get reported in the media. And, you know, I do see sort of glimmers of it throughout LinkedIn, which is great. But people don't realise how much talent there is in this country. And for sure, there are companies that are well worth checking out and well worth visiting. And, you know, I really hope, I definitely would be, you know, hoping that buyers do look closer to home. You know, it isn't always actually about cost anymore, because some of the low-cost country sources have actually increased the prices anyway, because they've kind of come full circle and realised that they can charge more. So it's almost like, well, what's the point in doing that and having long lead times as well? You mentioned that protectionism. I'm kind of a bit of a free market type of person, if I'm honest. I don't like a fake sort of protectionist type regime, really. I think it sometimes can set industries up to fail. You know, when it all goes wrong, it can just collapse. So I'm a bit more free market, but I think it will just naturally come back, because I do see a lot of companies pulling back and reshoring. And you know, what better than just sort of being able to just jump in the car now and just go and visit the factory? that's a lot closer, and getting home and being able to have tea in your own house and put the kids to bed. You don't have to sort of take great long trips either. So there's lots of benefits, really.
Absolutely. So we're talking about purchasing. It can be a really fantastic career choice. How do we get more youngsters not just interested in manufacturing, but interested in manufacturing through the purchasing route? What's going to appeal to the youngsters of today? The school leavers, or kids that are still coming through school or college. What are the selling points really from a purchasing perspective? How are we going to get more youngsters hooked into purchasing, but purchasing in manufacturing as well?
I think the old sort of traditional images of manufacturing, where the old industrial, everything's kind of covered in soot and dirty buildings and things like that. There are some, casting facilities, for example. I've been in lots of them, but there are also, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way, it's still interesting and fascinating to see how the parts are made, but there are also quite sexy aspects, if I dare say it, of manufacturing, and the way that things can be created. You can 3D print stuff nowadays, and it's actually quite scientific and interesting, I think. And in terms of purchasing, I try to appeal to people to join purchasing by saying, look, you will, like, as I said before, you will never spend a day bored in this kind of a job. It's so varied. You get involved in so many different aspects. You can go and learn how the company is producing these parts. I mean, one of the aspects I love is working with sort of the engineering department, understanding how the thought process works when they're creating a brand new product, and just learning about the way that things are created. It can be amazing. And then when you see the end product as well, and it's sort of being launched, whether it's a shiny airplane engine or a great fancy new digger, just seeing how everything's come together and you're a part of it is really. There's nothing like it, I don't think. I think manufacturing, working in purchasing, in manufacturing in the UK, I think is one of the best jobs in the world. And I will always bang the drum. Manufacturing's paid the bills for me and my husband for the last 22 years. Everything, our house and everything's literally come from manufacturing. And for me, the purchasing aspect as well. So there's so much to go for. There's such an opportunity, and you can make a real difference. And also the kind of the sustainability side of things, and the way I think that legislation will probably go soon. There's such an opportunity to improve emissions. You can reduce emissions in companies and things like that. So for youngsters that might be kind of that really sort of they're interested in that, then you can get into purchasing, and you can imagine if you change the way a supplier produces something and they reduce their carbon emissions, and all the other companies that supplier sells to, you basically having a massive impact on reducing carbon emissions. And I think that should appeal to a lot of the sort of younger potential people as well.
Absolutely. And I was just thinking then, whilst you were talking, the sustainability thing, it seems to really strike a chord with a lot of youngsters. And also, whether materials and parts are sourced in the UK or from abroad, wherever they're sourced from a purchasing career point of view, there's always going to be a bit of travel, whether it's UK or European or Far East, wherever it might be. If travel appeals to an individual, then purchasing certainly can tick that box. Okay, it's not going to be all the time, but it's certainly a plus point for that individual. And then just looking at all the things around us, whether it's in a car showroom, a supermarket, whether you're flying on a plane to holiday, if you're involved in a business that are manufacturing an aircraft, for example, you might not want to have a career in a factory, but being a buyer in a purchasing department, you're having a major impact on the production of that aeroplane. Nonetheless, it's just you're not physically on a machine or on an assembly line, but you're playing a major part. So, as you quite rightly say, so much variety. It's I often think I may have missed my vocation from that. Recruitment's done me okay. Well, Katie, it's been a pleasure to have you on Insights for Manufacturing today. I've really enjoyed talking about procurement. It's been a learning exercise for me. I hope the audience has found it really beneficial and interesting. I'm sure they have. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Jeff. It's a pleasure and it's an honour to be asked.
You're very welcome. So that wraps up today's episode. Thank you very much for listening, and look out for the next edition of Insights for Manufacturing. See you next time, and bye-bye.